Hey Elliot, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. How about you, Josh?
Not too bad. So, in this conversation, we wanted to talk a little bit about our origin stories. So, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. Are you interested?
Yeah, of course. Before we get kicked off, how was your weekend?
It wasn't bad. I actually had a barbecue over the weekend with some friends and tried something that I've never had before. We had barbecue barbecue beef ribs, short ribs,
Okay. Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
I've always had pork ribs. Beef ribs are something entirely different. All right
Yeah.
off the bone. They are very tender, and beef ribs are completely different, where there's a lot more connectivity tissue. And yeah, they tasted great, but they were a completely different experience to chew.
Yeah. Different beast altogether. It reminds me of a trip that I took down to Austin. And of course, Austin, very well known for their barbecue as well. And went to a restaurant down there. And being from St. Louis, ribs sound great to me. So when I hear ribs, that's what I think of is baby back ribs, pork ribs.
Hmm.
And yeah, ordered ribs and they were beef ribs. Completely different proportion. I did like a slab of ribs, thinking like St. Louis style slab of ribs is a lot of food, but manageable.
Yep.
Let me say, a slab of beef ribs, not manageable for one person.
So that was a new experience for me. How about your weekend?
Yeah, we're just kind of gearing up for school around my household at the moment. Three little kids, they're all going to be in school starting tomorrow, so it's exciting times, let me tell you.
That is exciting. And I'm past that stage in life. All my kids are grown now and out of school. And now I just have to deal with any of the traffic that's nearby. When that school starts up, it's completely different experience around my town because I live right outside of the school itself. And I don't even try to go anywhere at between 7 and 8 a.m. in the, what is it, 2 to 3 o'clock hour time frame because traffic is a nightmare.
Yep, the luxuries of early retirement.
Right.
Without much further ado, let's get into our topic today. You want to let the viewers know what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so we'll just go through our origin stories and where we came from a money standpoint, what our earliest memories were, and how that shaped our decisions and where we went through our early life and maybe into adulthood, and then how we found the financial independence community and what we've learned and where we've gone from there. So I'll go ahead and get things started with my earliest memories around money. And this is really going back to whenever I was a little kid. I don't even remember how old I was, but one of my first memories when I noticed that money was, or I guess I found out that money was different for different people, was I was at a birthday party. I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, and I was at a birthday party with a friend of mine. There was a bunch of us there, and I noticed he had a much larger house than we did. And he had, I think, 3 or 4 younger siblings. They all had their own individual bedrooms, which was unique to me because I had a younger sister. We often shared a bedroom or we were together a lot. And then I noticed that this kid had just tons of toys. He had all the He-Man, all the G.I. Joe, all the Transformers. He had everything. It was unbelievable. So after the party, I remember going home and telling my mom this and asking her, like, why do I not have these toys? And I remember she tried to do a good job of explaining that his parents were in a different situation than my parents were, that they owned a business, that they were just in a different situation and they could afford those things. And I remember feeling like a letdown or disappointed that
Sure.
I didn't have the ability to have those things. So I remember that as being just, I don't know if it's a pivotal moment, definitely has stuck with me my entire life. I remember that from 40 years ago. That was something that I noticed.
Yeah, it's amazing how even those first memories are so impactful and really are our thoughts about money, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So then I remember that, like after that, starting to notice differences in how kids dressed and the shoes that we wore. This might have been getting into the middle school ages and starting to notice that kids were wearing name brand shoes and name brand clothes. And I came from a pretty humble background. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They worked blue collar jobs, and we definitely had food and shelter and all the basic necessities, but clothing was just whatever Walmart had to offer. That was good enough for us.
Sure, absolutely.
And I remember seeing this must have been in junior high. I think I was in seventh grade. And that is like the most, just one of the toughest times in a young kid's life growing up. And I remember this kid that was a year or two older than me. It was in PE, and I was wearing the name brand Spalding was my shoes. I had some high tops, and I thought they were cool. This
Hmm.
kid started making fun of me because I was wearing these shoes, and he had Jordans, and he's like, "Where'd you get yours at Walmart or wherever it was?" And it was like one of those moments. Then other kids were laughing at the same time. So it was just one of those situations where I felt like inferior to the rest of my classmates. And I really wanted to fit in. And I was actively trying to get my mom to get me better shoes. We started going to shoe stores, and I remember getting Converse for the first time, was the nicer shoes that I bought back in
Hmm.
seventh or eighth grade. So just those early moments, and kids can be just so cruel, but it really impacted how I felt about money, what we were spending our money on, and how to fit in with society.
Yeah, absolutely. You really hit the nail on the head as the keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, even starts at those young ages. And like you said, middle school is such a foundational time for just the feeling of belonging and camaraderie, etc. That's hard. It's a
Yeah,
hard
it
time.
was. And it even continued into high school with my first car. I remember my parents, they went out of their way to purchase a truck for me at the time. It was a little Mazda pickup truck. It cost like $800. I remember that. And it looked rough. It was beat up, had some rust on it. And I was so happy to have it. But then I started noticing some of my friends, because I was one of the older ones that turned 16. And some of my friends, their parents were buying them Camaros. Like, of all things, they were getting sports cars as their first car. I was having those same kind of emotional feelings, like, man, I'm standing out as the kid who has the car that's not as nice as everyone else's, and still just felt like a little bit of embarrassment that I didn't have what everyone else had. So I think that just continued to take me in the direction of I needed to, number one, get a job and earn money so I could buy my own nicer stuff. But then I was, like you said, keeping up with the Joneses, I was constantly trying to get the nicer thing, the better thing, whether it was shoes, clothes, cars, hats. I had a huge hat addiction and collection whenever I was in high school, and would and music. I remember needing to have all the latest music. So everything, that all the money I was making in my little part-time job was all going to consumer spending. There was definitely no savings involved.
See, I have the benefit of being just a few years younger than you, so you didn't get to slip into the Napster and the LimeWire and save a few bucks here and there doing various illegal activities that may or may not have happened.
That's right. Yeah, that didn't happen for me. I was definitely in my 20s before Napster came along. And yeah, those early years, I was spending money like it was infinitely available to me, and spending more than I was making, definitely living paycheck to paycheck. I remember after graduating high school, most of my friends were going on to college and working part time, and probably getting most of their spending subsidized in some way from their parents. And my parents were definitely encouraging me to be more independent with not only my spending, but just life in general. And so I was responsible for literally everything from car insurance to repairs and maintenance and all of those things. And I was going to school part time, maybe less than part time at some points. I took some semesters off and worked full time. I was working 48 hours a week, 6 8 hour shifts, and
Wow.
spending all the money that I was making. I was working at a grocery store at the time, and I was getting paid every Friday. And I remember Wednesday or Thursday coming along, and I would be completely out of money, the money that I made the week before, which is just so hard to believe that little. 19-year-old Josh was spending whatever I was making, $400 or whatever it was at the time. I was spending that in a matter of like five
Sure.
days back in 1996, whatever year it was. But I did it, and I did that for years, and that continued on into my early 20s.
Yeah, that's impressive that you were able to light it on fire that quick. But I want to go back to one of the earlier points that you said about your parents trying to instill that independence in you. How did you feel at that time of that? And maybe now, how would you reflect on their decision?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that at the time I was a little bit frustrated, maybe a little bit discouraged or disappointed that I had to take it all upon myself. They did help a little bit with college when I started at junior college after high school. I remember they contributed a little bit towards that, maybe helped me out with books and things like that. But my mom was basically of the mindset that we'll cover your needs, you cover the wants. But my mindset was those needs and wants blend. You might say that a need is a pair of shoes, but I need the Jordans.
Yeah, clearly. Mom's not right next to you in gym class hearing
That's
about the
right.
Spaldings.
That's
Needs and wants get very blended very quickly.
exactly. And I think that there, to answer the second part of your question, I think it was beneficial. In hindsight, looking back on it now, I'm very proud that it forced me later on, and we'll get to that in later years, to really embrace that independence and stand on my own. And it is something that I tried to instill in my kids so that they were also of the same mindset. We had the same kind of struggles where we encouraged them to be independent. We bought their first car, but then we said, hey, you have to pay for your own insurance and gas, and we can help with maintenance until you're 18. We had a variety of rules in place. And they would constantly come home and talk about how kids at school had this or that and their parents paid for it, or they had nicer cars and they were on their second or third car and parents had paid for it. And who knows if any of that was true, but there's definitely there's similarities to the way I grew up
Sure.
and the way that they have grown up so far.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a great parallel to see, obviously, from your remembering back in your formative years all the way to now being a father and how your kids react. Because I imagine, yeah, they're probably having the same feelings that you had back when you were in high school. And obviously, as they get older, if they have children of their own, then I imagine they will have very similar feelings.
It will be interesting to see how that works out over time. Will they be more like me and how my parents and how we were raised and my wife, or will they give in to other things? So time will tell. That's many years off into the future.
Yeah, it'll be interesting when we catch up on the next episode. And yeah, hear some of the differences even between your upbringing and my upbringing, and
Yeah,
especially about that.
I'm interested.
So I won't get too off tangent here. How about you've taken us through like the high school times? What's next?
Yeah, so at 22, 23, I guess it was, that's when I was still in college part-time. I was working full-time, and I ended up becoming a father early and got married. This was back in 2007, and we had our first son towards the end of 2007. And at that point, that's when I transitioned or graduated to more of a traditional full-time job. So I was always working in like part-time or jobs without benefits. And I moved into a role with a company I was looking for benefits and insurance and all of those kinds of things. So we got married, had a baby. We're continuing to just follow the trends of what people around us were doing, which was buying our first home, looking to upgrade our cars, essentially just continuing to evolve in the money hole of consumer debt. So in my early 20s, I just continued along that same path that I was in as a late teenager, where I was living paycheck to paycheck. I had some student loans. I did finish my bachelor's degree, and thankfully my student loans weren't too much. But as we went through that sort of decade of my life, those 20s, we had a couple of other boys. So we ended up with 3 boys. And then we traded up our house once. We continued to purchase newer cars, all financed. We took on more consumer debt, and we just thought that was the way that you did it. That was until you eventually, in my mind, I think back to whenever I was in my 20s, and I don't even know what I was thinking. If I thought that, hey, at some point in the future, I'm just going to be able to pay this stuff off, or if I'm just going to have this, and this is how life is, just be on that hamster wheel of debt, pay some down. I didn't have any intention at all when it came to money. It was just earn, spend, earn, spend.
Sure. And I think what you just illustrated there is exactly what kind of the default path that is so ingrained in our culture is go get the degree or go get the job, get the house, get the wife, get the kids. You just have that kind of quote unquote American dream so instilled in our culture that nobody questions if that's right or not. That's just the default.
We were there.
You say a lack of intentionality, I just say, hey, you're part of the cog of America, so to speak.
Yeah, America, American consumerism. And I remember at one point thinking that I was smart because I had credit card debt that I had gotten an introductory offer to roll it over at 0% interest on a different card. And I thought I was making a smart money move. Oh, I'm going to take this debt that I'm paying, whatever it was, 20% interest on at the time, and I'm going to roll it over and I'm going to pay 0% interest. And I just have to pay it off in the next 6 months or a year or whatever. And I remember doing that a couple of times and thinking that, oh, I got this. This is how you manage money.
Yeah, you got one over on those banks, right? They weren't making a dime on you.
Yeah, meanwhile, absolutely no savings other than I remember contributing to my 401k for a period of time. I remember when I got my real job and I had the benefits and everything, a supervisor who took me and another guy, a friend of mine, started at the same time. He took us down to HR shortly after we started, like within a week or two. And he sat us down with a guy in HR who explained to us what a 401k was. Completely foreign concept to me at the time at 22 years old. And I'd never heard of it before. And they were talking about, hey, look, you contribute this much. We're going to match this amount. And over a period of time, you're going to have this much money. And stupid, naive 22-year-old Josh was thinking, I don't care about 32-year-old, 40, 50-year-old Josh.
Retirement.
I need this money now. I need it now. I need to spend it now. I have bills. I have kids or whatever, kid on the way. And for the first few years, I didn't contribute to it at all. And then I remember my friend who went with me a couple years later, he was telling me that he had been contributing the minimum and that he had this huge amount of money in his 401k. And that was a little bit of a light bulb that went off. I'm like, oh, crap, I missed the boat here. So I
missed the boat.
Yeah, I started contributing the minimum to get the match at that point. And then, as we'll talk about in the next section, there was a point in time whenever I stopped contributing to that as well. But absolutely no concept of savings or retirement throughout most of my 20s. It didn't even cross my mind.
Sure. You alluded to it. So you're on this default path. Where does your life go from there?
Yeah, so it got to a point where it went in a really tough direction. So around 2007, I had just turned 30, and my former wife and I, we decided to part ways. And that was it was probably the lowest point and toughest point of my life. We had 3 boys together, and our finances were an absolute disaster. But we decided we're going to separate. We're going to try to do what's best for ourselves and the kids, and we're going to stay close together, but we need to sell this house. We had this newish, it was a couple of years old at that point. We'd built a house. I don't even know how we got approved. Back in those early days of the 2000s, back in
2007.
2005 was when
the heyday.
We built the house in 2005, and we had no business building this house that we built together. And it was way bigger than we needed, even with having 3 kids. It was a ton of debt, and they let us finance 100% of it. We sold our other house and were able to roll that in on the down payment, but then everything else, it wasn't even 20% because we still owed on the first house.
On the old house.
Yeah. So we weren't even at 20% down. I think we financed 90% or whatever it was. And we had two mortgages. We had the main mortgage, which covered up to 80%. And then there was the other mortgage that covered the other 10%. I remember our house payment at the time was like $1,200 a month with the two mortgages combined. And I couldn't have been making more than $40,000 a year, something like that, $40,000 a year. And I don't think she was making much. But anyway, I digress. We decided we were going to sell this house, but it was the end of 2007 and the market was tanking. Houses in our area were not being put up for sale at all, but we went ahead and listed ours with the hopes that we would sell it. And of course, we owed more on it at that point than the market was saying that it was worth. We had a couple of showings, but eventually nothing materialized. We were not able to even get an offer whatsoever. It stayed on the market for 3 months or something like that. We tried to make the payments. We tried to keep everything going. And eventually just got to a point where my former wife, I got to get my own place. I need to move on. And I agreed. I was in a limbo situation. I was actually couch surfing for a period of time where I was staying with friends. I eventually moved in with my mom, but it was a very tense and stressful situation. So we eventually had to just let the house go into foreclosure. But during that period of time, there was a lot of houses that were going into foreclosure in late 2007. So the process was very slow. And at this time, I started talking to a bankruptcy attorney because we had all this debt. I wasn't able to make the payments. We were still trying to figure out the divorce situation and trying to go through that. And I talked to a bankruptcy attorney who basically advised me, hey, just go ahead and stay in the house until they kick you out. And since my former wife had moved out, I went ahead and moved back in. We were sharing custody of the boys at the time. And in late 2007, I remember it was in December, I got a knock on the door and it was a sheriff who was giving me an unlawful detainer message from Wells Fargo at the time. They were basically saying, hey, we own your home. You need to get out. And luckily it wasn't I had to be out by that moment, but I had to be out by the end of the month. It's
Sure.
on Christmas time and just the lowest of the low. It was a really rough time. So that was,
I was going to say, all the stars are clearly aligning, but maybe not in the way that you want them to.
yeah. So
Perfect storm.
it was an ugly period, but that was 2007 and going into 2008 when the divorce took a while to settle and we had to file for bankruptcy, Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which at the time I had total liabilities of $240,000. $186,000 was on the mortgages. And that took years to resolve. We didn't get that fully resolved until 2010. But in the meantime, one positive thing through all of that is I was able to maintain employment and also continue to develop my career and have upward mobility. And that was the only bright spot, I would say, other than having three wonderful boys and all of those things. It was a very tough time in the early stages there of my 30s.
Sure. And clearly this is a story of you never get to retire ever and you'll be working until you're 75.
Yeah, it never even crossed my mind. Still at that point, I'm in my 30s and I'm like, what? I'm just going to have to work forever. Not as if all of that wasn't scary enough. I was hearing little tidbits in the news of segments where they were saying that unemployment rates are high, and we were hearing in the St. Louis area, we were hearing employers that were letting people go. And one day, the guy who sat next to me, he got asked to go into our supervisor's office. And then within a matter of minutes, someone from HR joined the conversation and closed doors, but I could see what was going on. And then
Sure.
moments later, he was walked out the front door. And I was freaking out, thinking that now our company was going to go through this layoff. So I'm in the middle of this financial disaster of my own, thinking that I'm going to also be laid off. And I got asked from my supervisor to join her in her office.
Oh, no.
And I'm not
Yeah.
kidding, Elliot. I was literally ready to throw up.
Yeah.
Scared. And I go in and she says, we had to let him go. I'm next in line.
Yeah. Yeah.
She said, we just wanted to let you know that he's been let go. And I'm like, okay. So now I'm looking confused. And I think I had either a
Yeah.
relief or a confused look on my face. And she says, are you okay? And I thought I was going to be next. And she's, oh no, he was a
Yeah.
poor performer. All of these things. And I'm like, oh, an amazing sense of relief.
Yeah.
Just
Weight lifted off your shoulders, I'm
exactly,
sure.
exactly. So that was a scary moment. But then another inflection point, I guess I need to back up for just a moment. So I met my now wife, Lori, 2008 timeframe, and she was coming from a similar background. She came from a situation where she was in a very bad situation with money. She had gone through a divorce. She had a daughter. She was living paycheck to paycheck. She was behind on her bills. We got together and commiserated over our shared failures and all the struggles that we've had. And talking about, we're going to do better in life. We're going to figure this out. We're going to do better with our finances. We're going to be just better people and learn from our mistakes. Takes us to the next stage in the journey.
Yeah.
Ori and we eventually got married in late 2010, so a few years later. And shortly after we had been together, I remember I came into her office at the time and she was like trying to pay the bills. She was in a situation where she was trying to decide, should I pay for electric or should I pay for water this month? She was literally trying to juggle which one should I let go until next month. And there was a bunch of that juggling going on. Meanwhile, she was behind on her house payment as well. So she was trying to avoid getting her utilities cut off. And she said, I just want to be able to pay my bills on time. And she was pretty much in tears,
Yeah.
emotional
I'm
time. And
sure. Like, that's going to be a good result for anyone. For
yeah.
sure.
So it was another like
Tough decisions.
inflection point for me where I said, okay, people do this. Like people are better with their money, right? Not everybody is living in a situation where their utilities are on the verge of getting cut off or their house is on the verge of foreclosure because they can't make the house payment. So
Sure.
I was completely, like I mentioned, I had no clue about money, but I started to try to do some research. And somewhere along the line, we stumbled upon the television show Till Debt Do Us Part. And it was a Canadian show that was set in a situation where this host went in and met with usually a couple and talked through their finances with them. And they were generally in a bad situation and they were trying to project out what their future would look like if they continued down this path. And typically it was very eye-opening because they would say, okay, you're at $50,000 in debt, but in the next 5 years, you could be at $250,000 in debt if you continue this path. And a lot of the tips that she provided in that show were helpful to us because she started to implement with them. She would always have them do a cash money system where they would have jars set aside for all of their different buckets of spending. They would have groceries,
Sure.
entertainment, gas, those kinds of things. So we instituted that. And that was the first step to getting our finances back in order, because we never had our finances in order.
Sure.
But it gave us a way to start to learn how to basically manage our money.
Yeah. So very similar to the Dave Ramsey envelope system and Till Debt Do Us Part. Sounds like the modern day parallel would be like Ramit Sethi has a very similar show.
Yep.
In that he talks to real life people and couples and says, let's rip the curtains open and see what's going on and where you're going to be if you keep on going along this path.
Yeah, the things that they did was they would peel back the curtain and look at what are you actually spending your money on. I think they would go through an exercise where they would talk about how much do you spend on these things a month, and then they would do a reality check and see actually you're spending $500 a month on going out to eat or whatever, fast food or whatever it might be. We
Sure.
were performing a similar exercise because that's where we found a lot of our money was going. It was just going to those frivolous expenses. Of course, the big ones, the Housing, transportation, and food were big expenses for us, especially with a household of 6. But we were just spending frivolously on clothes, shopping, going out to eat, and just living a life that we couldn't afford.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's something that you and I certainly know is that's all too common in America, right?
Mhm.
And just the world is how much that people live a life that on the surface looks like, hey, they've got it all together and they're doing all these great things. It's Instagram worthy, whatever. It's like the analogy of the duck. It looks like it's going nice and calm on the surface, but underneath, the legs are going like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. And so it must have been shortly after that my wheels started spinning a little bit, and we started thinking, okay, there's more to money than this. There's people that have it figured out. So it just by sheer coincidence, we were walking down our street one day and a family was having a yard sale and they had a bunch of books laid out. And I was never a reader. Like I never read books, Elliot. I'm embarrassed to say that. Up through 30 something years old, I only read a book if I had to in school. I did
Hey,
less.
I was going to say that's impressive if you actually did it and you had to do it for school. Like, I don't know that I even met that qualification all the time.
And I probably didn't do that very well. But I stopped at this garage sale and just for whatever reason was perusing through the books, and they had a Dave Ramsey book there. I think it was Financial Peace University. I picked it up and I was looking at it, and Lori made a comment, and just then the lady came over and was chatting with us, the lady who was having the garage sale. And she mentioned that her and her husband had worked through these steps and it really helped them get into a better financial situation. She recommended it. So I bought it for $2 or whatever it was at the time and read that. And it really spoke to me. It started to lay the foundation of, yeah, you can do money better. I don't really even remember too many of the takeaways from that other than the baby steps.
Sure.
I don't even remember what the baby steps are at this point in time because it was back then, but it was getting out of debt and starting to save money. So it really laid the foundation for us on how to start saving money. Coincidentally, around the same point in time, my neighbor who lived across the street from me, he and I were talking in passing because he was getting let go from Chrysler. You remember when Chrysler had the big plant here in St. Louis?
Yep.
And all over the news, they were talking about people that were upset and angry and trying to fight for the company to stay. But he, at the time, he was excited. And he was a little bit older than me, so he was in his like mid-30s, and he was saying, yeah, they're going to give us a severance package, and I can't wait to take advantage of that. And I think it may have been like 2 years worth of pay or a year's worth of pay or something like that. It was pretty significant. And
Sure.
he had said something in passing about reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and wanting to make some investments. And he didn't know into what yet, but he was going to make better use of that money than just go blow it, essentially. And I had heard that. I heard him mention it a couple times, and I finally thought, I got to check this out. What is this Rich Dad, Poor Dad thing all about? So I picked up that book and read that as well. And it's a nice story. It's a good story about, have you ever read it?
I actually haven't.
No?
I know that's like a cardinal sin for somebody in the FI community.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been a gateway drug, so to speak, for so many people in the FI community.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It was.
Robert Kiyosaki.
Yep. And it was for me from the aspect of learning about assets and liabilities. And I'm going to admit to something that is completely embarrassing here, Elliot. My bachelor's degree is in business management. I remember reviewing case studies and talking through all of these companies that were in such either poor or fantastic financial shape, but I couldn't do it at my own personal level.
Sure.
Talk through all of these situations with these companies and learn about all the failures that they had made. And I didn't fully understand or comprehend what the difference between an asset and a liability.
Hey, you think that that's so embarrassing? I went and got my MBA, Master's in Business Administration, probably one of my most despised classes throughout that whole program was accounting. And it was, yeah, it's like the most basic fundamentals, like you're saying, assets, liabilities, plus and minuses to our net worth, things that become such basic table stakes
Yeah.
in kind of the FI world. Yeah, no, I think it was one of my classes that I did not get an A in my MBA class.
And that, we'll get to your
Chalk one
story.
up for embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to your story, but was that before you were really digging into the FI stuff?
It was along the path. So, yeah, it would have been early in my stumbling upon FI literature, I should say.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I remember in Rich Dad Poor Dad, the one thing that like smacked me upside the head that was just so, oh my gosh, this is so obvious, was that he made the statement that poor people buy liabilities, rich people buy assets. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that is, I mean, it's it's maybe a little overgeneralized, but it made me
Sure.
realize that I was buying liabilities. That's where my money was going. All liabilities, things that did not
Yep.
make me more money or have any kind of
Yep.
return.
Depreciating assets, right?
Exactly,
Nothing
exactly.
that's generating a return.
Yep.
Yeah.
So after that, I was hooked. I was like, I have a lot to learn here. I never was really interested in money. I was never interested in finance, investing, or any of those things. But after kind of reading those couple of books and then just a desire for improving my life, that's when I started doing more research. Turned to the internet, started finding blogs around 2012. And I remember The Simple Dollar and Money Under 30 were two early blogs that I found. I don't think either of them exist anymore, certainly not under the same authors that they did at the time. But they were more on the side of how to manage your money and maybe had some tips on how to make more money. But it was mainly around budgeting and just managing your money better. And then at some point in there, I remember reading these when I was at work. I would pull up a blog and try to discreetly have it off to the side and be
I
reading
was
it.
going to say, you rebel.
I always had my fingers on the alt tab ready
Yeah,
to
alt tab.
flip back, but I remember reading those and getting to the end of the article and then just either closing it out or moving on to the next article, whatever. And at some point realized that there's a whole comments section where people were commenting on the blog, and that's where I started noticing that other money bloggers were posting and started finding other people that were out there. So at that point, I think I found Budgets Are Sexy by Jay Money at first, and he was doing net worth calculating and sharing his monthly net worth update. And that was when I first noticed that, or first realized that, okay, here's like a metric. And it was funny that in my career, that's what we measured. We were always measuring to the performance of what is currently,
Sure.
the ups and downs of whatever it was that we were responsible for. So obviously, why aren't you doing that with your own personal finances and having some metrics in place to tell you, are you doing good or bad? Which direction are you heading? So seeing the net worth statements, and then Mr. 1500, I stumbled upon him in Carl's blog around the same time, and he was doing something similar, but he started talking about early retirement. And it was a completely different concept, but still it was very new to me. I wasn't really embracing that part of it. I was just like, okay, we're better with money now. We're starting to track our net worth. We're learning these foundational concepts and starting to apply them. Early retirement wasn't even really a thought until I stumbled across Mr. Money Mustache in 2014. And I remember exactly where I was. I was at work again, and I was reading on one blog, and I kept seeing these Mr. This and Mr. That, and Mr. Money Mustache. What a weird name.
The moniker, right?
So I flipped over to his content, and I don't even remember which article I read first, but I just remember it. I was quickly addicted to it, to the point where I even shared it with one of the ladies that I was working with at the time. I'm like, oh my God, this guy, everything that he's writing, this makes so much sense.
That's right.
And I remember going on a work
And then
trip.
she got face punched, and then
Yeah. She was interested, but not hook, line, and sinker like I was.
sure.
But I remember we were leaving like the next day for a trip out of state for work. And the whole way up there, I'm trying to read articles. I get to my hotel room and I'm reading more articles. And I stayed up that night until 2 in the morning, just like going through
Yeah.
reading all the articles. Lack of sleep. The next morning I'm having coffee, met up with her, same lady. I'm telling her like all these things. I'm just probably just spewing a million miles a minute here. And she's just, oh, okay for you that you found this.
Yeah. Like, that's good, Josh.
So that was where I was all about financial independence. As soon as I discovered that and started reading Mr. Money Mustache, I was like, okay, we've gotten a lot of our finances in order. I started tracking my net worth, and in 2012, I was positive net worth. We were $25,000 in net worth, and we were 35 years old, Lori and I combined. And I was proud that we were at that point, but I knew I had a long way to go, and just started from there and learning as much as I could through blogs and reading books and eventually podcasts and YouTube. And still to this day, I'm still consuming tons of that material. But we spent roughly 10 or 12 years. I eventually set my early retirement date and had a lot of experiments and learnings along the way, but did achieve early retirement this past April, just 4 months ago. So I, thank you. I will save all of that for future episodes because there's a lot to cover between when you are at a stage when you're finally at net worth positive and all the things and levers you can pull to the point where you're financially independent. And we'll cover that in a lot of our future episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. As the saying goes, the process is simple, but it ain't easy. So, yeah, super exciting. First, want to just say thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story with us, and really look forward to talking with you more.
Yeah, same here, buddy.
All right. Sign off for now.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Elliot.